Okay, got it. All right, guys. Friday morning again. What a great opportunity to come together. You know, as we started this year with respect to the theme for 2023, we decided that that theme was going to be on leadership. And what a blessing it's been so far. So year to date, I was thinking last night, the topics and the principles that Joe has covered. And he began by providing an overview of leadership as we came into the month of January, followed by three key principles that he's addressed. The first one beginning with integrity, the second, humility, and the third, honesty. Incredibly important key principles with respect to leadership. Today, we're going to be blessed with Joe covering a few other principles related to leadership, and the first being authority, and the second with respect to generosity. Before I hand the keys over to Joe, I just want to say a couple of things that kind of set the foundation on both, because I believe they're relevant to the world that we live in today. For example, while the ultimate authority is God, and that's what the Bible says, there are many references in the Old Testament and New Testament with respect to the importance of authority and generosity. But I'm addressing authority today, so it is important. So one of the primary conditions for achieving and maintaining authority is respect. Because without respect, it's impossible to have authority. It's impossible to govern unless there's respect. So today we see an outcome of a world that's in chaos because people have lost the respect for authority. We see chaos all around us. And the process begins, you know, when you think about shaping authority and the importance of it, it begins when a child is young. If a child has seen authority modeled poorly, or they've seen disrespect for authority when they've been young from their parents or those who are older, well, they're going to grow up with a view and a perception, a negative perception of authority. We see that today. We see police officers being abused, either being shot, being a lack of disrespect, or a very high level of disrespect, rather. And we also see teachers that are having a very difficult time because there's a lack of respect for authority. And that's an outcome of young kids that have seen a very poor modeling or have a very poor view of authority. So it really is incumbent upon us guys to model the importance of authority correctly, beginning when kids are young. So if you have grandchildren or children, or you can mentor someone, presenting a positive view of the way that we respect authority, the way we model authority, is very, very important. So the stakes are very, very high. Lastly, with respect to the point on generosity, which Joe's going to cover this morning as well. You know, there are eternal laws that are unaffected by outside influences. So let me give you an example, and this is in it's in the New Testament where it says, "Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, but God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to bless you abundantly so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work." My point here is that modeling generosity with all of the resources you have, it's just not money, it's time, it's effort, it's skill sets, it's the talents that God has given you, will not just bless others as it will, but you will be blessed in the process as well. So with that, I just wanted to kind of set the foundation on the importance of authority, modeling it correctly, as well as the importance of being generous with all the resources and assets that God has given us. So with that, Joe, I'm going to hand over the keys to you, and I look forward to you sharing your insights and your thoughts as we take this study forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Great start. Great tee up. Today we're gonna. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had a question.
Sure.
Maybe we can get that. So last week, you gave an example of an experience that you had, not to embarrass you, but I wanted to understand the aspects of leadership that was brought up by that example. And that was when you had a family member come to you for advice for something that was embarrassing.
Yes,
And it struck me, when I think of leader, I think of these people, the government leaders, and they're not really approachable.
Oh, this is good.
Yeah. But the aspect of leadership that you were giving in this illustration was you're approachable, you're non-judgmental, and you're supportive.
bingo, yep.
So, so I guess I wanted to confirm that that's an accurate understanding of what we're
Sure is.
portraying here as leadership.
Very
Not
good.
someone who's remote, leading thousands of people or whatever,
No,
what number,
absolutely. Yeah.
but in a very personal sense of having the love, I guess would be the word to capture that,
Yeah.
in your interactions with other people.
You're right on, Ken. That was great assessment.
Okay.
You answered your own question.
Yeah. I kind of,
Yeah,
okay, well, that's,
What were the the qualities you listed? Approachable, non-judgmental, and there was another one. Caring or
Caring,
sympathetic or
kind,
something?
caring, not judgmental. Yeah. Well, remember we talked a few weeks ago, really when we teed up this whole series, about leadership is about character, and character is about influence, and influence is about trust, and trust is about vulnerability. So you can reverse engineer the whole cycle. So when you treat someone with respect, use Chris's word today, when you're vulnerable, when you're not judgmental, when you don't have a catastrophic attack when they tell you something that's not very friendly, and you just are there for them, wow. You build trust and influence, and your character shows up big time, and you're open. Now, I'm going to take issue with your characteristic. The people that run our governments are leaders. I don't think they are. You have a faulty model there, quite candidly. Now, there isn't, that's not because there isn't reasons for that, okay? One of the things, frankly, whether you like it or not, one of the things you learn as a leader is the concept of plausible deniability, okay? Because everybody wants to sue you, okay? So you have to navigate very carefully what you say or what you do. Look at Pence, he won't even have a meeting with a woman without somebody else in the room, and the door has to be open. I mean, these are lessons learned, okay? So we won't go down that rabbit hole, but the point is, you're right on. You're right on. Real leadership is love. And the whole message of this entire section on leadership is to look at what Jesus did. Look at how Jesus loved. Look at how Jesus was non-judgmental. Whether it's going to dinner to Caiaphas' house with all the tax collectors and all the bad people in town when he's coming into Jerusalem on a donkey. Okay, I mean, you just look at it. Just feeding the 5,000. By the way, that wasn't 5,000. That was 25,000 because it was men, women, and children. And biblically, historically, they never counted children and women when they made those estimates. So that wasn't 5,000. That was probably 5 times 5,000. Be that as it may, the point is, Jesus. It didn't matter who it was to Jesus. It didn't matter. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we talk a little bit about leadership positions. But I want to, Dallas, did you get your question?
I got it.
Comment? Okay, good. Okay, let's go back and get a point of reference here again. We are blessed to have Acts 20 as our guide, because that's really characterizes Paul's ministry launch out of Israel into Macedonia, into Greeks, into, frankly, the world of the Gentiles. Okay, let's also remember that was one of the real reasons Paul, as well as Jesus, as well as the apostles, were persecuted and treated poorly because of the fact that they were working with the Gentiles. Remember, back in those days, you had the Jews and the Gentiles. Okay, they were enemies. So one of the I believe, honestly, this is just my opinion, but I believe that one of the reasons Jewish people have a hard time recognizing Jesus as the Messiah is, number one, he doesn't look like they think a Messiah ought to look like.
Yeah.
Plus, he said, excuse me, I'm not exclusively for you. I'm for everyone. Well, that was kind of a rub in their face. Hey, wait a minute, you're our Messiah. You don't belong to anybody else. Excuse me, yes, I do. So I think there's a whole lot of very common, interesting emotional reality around that concept. Jesus is for everyone. He's not just for a group.
Right.
So because the door's all open. All you can do is come see him. So Paul is, as we said, at this point in the scripture, Paul is leaving. He's packing his goodies and he's headed out to Macedonia, and he's going to literally leave Israel for a long time. He's probably not going to come back for a while. So why don't one of you, Chris, maybe it might be easiest for you. Do you want to just read our scripture verse for the day, please?
You bet. Acts 20, verses 32 to 35. Now I commit you to God and to the word of his grace, which can build you up and give you an inheritance among all those who are sanctified. I have not coveted anyone's silver or gold or clothing. You yourselves know that these hands of mine have supplied my own needs and the needs of my companions. In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak, remembering the words the Lord Jesus himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive.
Thank you. Now, let me point out that first verse, verse 32, deals with authority. What Paul is saying to this group of men, and women for that matter, he's saying, I'm committing you to God and to the word of his grace. You have all been blessed by the Holy Spirit. You've all accepted Jesus. You've all decided that the way is the way you want to go. They didn't call Christianity then. They called it the way. And the early Christians, this 100 people that started this, what is now billions of people, Paul is trying to tell them, you have authority. I gave you authority. And that authority comes from Jesus' message in your heart. The very commission that Jesus gave us all to go out and preach the gospel and sometimes use words, right, Tom? And that is the authority that we all have. As
empowering them.
Oh, yeah, it's very empowering. So I want to make that distinction. That verse itself really speaks to the authority Paul is putting back into these people as he leaves. The balance of that scripture is really about generosity and giving, like Chris teed up earlier on. So that's the context of those two. That's why I put them together in today's message, because authority, frankly, is misunderstood. It's misunderstood because in life, we have an unfortunate perspective that we decide that authority is associated with a title or a position, okay? Which is really a poor way of looking at it. So let's go to the next slide, whoever's driving slides here. And let's take a look at what I just said, okay? I'm not taking any credit for this. This is work of John Maxwell, but I just put it down here for us to use. And actually, it's in reverse order of importance, but it's easier to explain it when I take it this way. The first level of leadership or authority, we pretty much understand. You have a job, you have a job description, you have people that work for you, you're on a chart, everybody knows who you are, you're the owner, you're the boss, you're the manager, you're the whatever, okay? And the people that work for you, frankly, are there because they have to.
Yeah.
Okay, that's their job. They got a job description. That's what they do. Okay, so a lot of people sometimes misinterpret their title and their position or their role as being a leader. It just starts there. Okay, it really just starts there. And it becomes something that builds. So let's go to the next. Somebody just, oh, Tom's showing up. Oh, good.
Oh.
Morning, Tom.
Oh, the love doctor.
Hey, hi, guys.
All right. Tom, we're just getting started. Really, you missed the scripture verse, but no problem. We're just getting started in some of the detail of the message. And we're talking about authority, and we're talking about 5 levels of leadership. I referenced this as work from John Maxwell. I don't want to take credit for this. I just want to take credit for bringing it to your attention. So we just finished talking about position, which is just title or role. A lot of people have a tendency to confuse that with being a leader. So that's dangerous. The next level is what we call permission. People follow you because they want to. Not complicated at all. They like being there. We always say in corporate America that people don't quit their job, they quit their boss. Okay, so when people leave, you got to ask the boss a hard question. What happened here? Because people don't leave companies, they leave the people they work for. So as your role as a leader and your authority begins to take root, and you're noticing that people are there because they want to be there, you're moving up, sort of up the scale. You're moving up the pyramid, if you will. Okay. And there's also a production or results-oriented driver for people, because they recognize what you've done for the organization, and they recognize the results that you produced, and they want to be there. I'm thinking about Dell's story he told when he stopped the production line because they just weren't doing the right thing. Now that's production, that's results there. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So when people do, they go, wait a minute. Look what he's done for this company. He knows what he's talking about. Well, boom, we're gonna respond. We're gonna salute that general. Okay. So you'll find times in your life where people will respond to you because of what you've done for the organization. You know, this may apply. I'm thinking of you, Bill. This may apply in the realm of physicians and dental practices, where your work becomes a mark of who you are and so forth. And people, man, I want to work for that guy. You know, I want to be there because what he does for patients. I mean, wow, this guy's good. I mean, who wants to work for a doctor that's not good? I mean, that's a big part of your psychic income, I call it. Those things you get from working without getting a paycheck. I call it psychic income. Okay.
Yeah, psychic. Now the description there is like they're loyal to the organization, and so they want to join the organization. But the examples you gave are technical expertise. I want to follow this person because they really know what they're doing.
Well, I meant to imply, and thanks for bringing that up. The technical results, the technical realities produce the results, whether that's in literally a technical way or just in good business management. In other words, people are driven because of the results that are produced in that environment. Okay, whether they're from a technical nature or not. But that's
So they're aligning. So they're aligning with the organization and the person because they're helping that organization.
Yeah, they feel part of those results. Here again,
they're part of the excellent results.
Yeah, I want you to look at this as a sort of an evolution of leadership, an evolution. Okay, people are there first because they got to be there, and then they sort of like you. There's a relationship developed, so they want to be there. Now, all of a sudden, they're seeing results are being produced in this organization by this individual or this group of individuals. Now, I really want to be there, okay, because I like the results. In other words, how many times have you had an opportunity to look at a new opportunity, and those that you turned down, probably one of the reasons you turned it down is because you just didn't see yourself working in that environment. There was something about that just didn't feel right, or the results weren't there for you. You weren't feeling it.
You could look at
Joe,
football team.
Joe, if I can offer a little bit different perspective along what you're saying here, let me kind of create a word picture here, because what you're saying is so appropriate in the work environment, but it's also appropriate to lay this out in our personal environment with our families. So last week, last Friday, I was having dinner with my son-in-law, and I always take that opportunity to cover a number of things with him when we're together like that. And one of the areas that we talked about was the area of finance. And the reason we did is because there are people every day who claim to be an authority with respect to, if you do this, if you do this, if you do this, if you do this, your finances are going to be fantastic. You know, you're going to become wealthy and all these. And there's all kinds of messages competing for your attention to follow them, saying that I'm the expert authority. Okay. And most of them, in my own personal opinion, are not correct. They're going to take you down the wrong path. And so what I always share with my son-in-law is, if you're going to follow a message or buy into something that someone is saying in a position of authority, what is their track record? How long have they been doing it? In other words, if someone is competing for your interest and they want to talk about investments or finance, but either they're young and inexperienced, or they've been there for a very short period of time, and they haven't produced results over a long period of time where there's little credibility, then be very, very careful of following a message or following an authority like that. But time and results is extremely important to really measure them before you buy into a message, especially with someone from the position of authority. So I just wanted to provide a little bit different picture outside the work environment in terms of how that applies to our own personal lives, whether it's finance, whether it's marriage counseling, whatever it happens to be. Make sure that the person or the authority who's conveying that message has a track record of doing it, as opposed to, you know what I'm saying, a very short success record and probably not something that's going to be beneficial over the long term.
Gotta have some credibility.
Yeah, well, what you've done so nicely there, Chris, apart from the obvious, is you got the next bullet. And the next bullet is people development, reproduction, I call it. People follow you because of what you've done for them. Okay. When you sat down with your son-in-law and you gave him some really, really good advice because you have credibility in the financial area, and you demonstrated that as the leader of your family, you did a lot for him. And he's going to have a tendency to believe you and follow you and respect you because of what you did for them. People are that way. You know, whether it's a matter of career progression in a corporate setting, or just credibility and love and care in a family setting, an understanding. When that 16-year-old walks in with 20 pounds of metal in their face and their hair's purple, and you don't have a heart attack, well, you know, that itself is probably worth something. But my point is a leader, all leaders produce leaders. You're not doing your job if you're not producing a leader. I mean, that's really what the job is of a leader.
That's what Paul was showing. That's
exactly what Paul was showing. Thank you, Tom. That's exactly right. That's what Jesus has asked us to do in the Great Commission. Guys, go be like me. I'm giving you the simple rule. In fact, I can't make it more simple. Love others as you love yourself. Thank you. That's it. Go. Okay.
And he showed him how to do it.
And he showed him how to do it. Exactly. Yeah. So that's the whole point, is take your love, take your care, take everything you have as a leader and build others up. Okay. Now, when you finally sort of add that all up, you really do get to be, what would Jesus do, Eric? I call respect, which is how Chris kind of teed this whole thing up. And I did it in red because this is really the pinnacle. When people follow because of who you are and what you represent. Now, when you are at that point, which, by the way, is where our government leaders should be. Okay. And I don't mean to be political, because you can be a sterling example of character, integrity, and honesty and not have a political position. I mean, you can be that person. And So why I put that in red is because that's really what Jesus did. Okay. People followed him because of who he was and what he represented. Think about this for a second. I don't know if any of you guys have been to the Holy Land. I know you have. But let's just try to paint this picture. Go out in the middle of Oregon, where there's nobody around anywhere,
Nothing.
and stand in the middle of a field and have 20,000 people come to see you and sit there all day long while you
Yeah.
talk to them. Now, they're there because of who you are and what you represent. Because let me tell you, there were no buses in those days in some ways. People didn't drive cars. You can only imagine what these people had to do to see Jesus and what the pull was. It's unbelievable. This is unbelievable when you think about it. How he would gather those crowds. And which here again was what the Pharisees were so upset about. Their pride was affected. He's drawing all these people to listen to him, and they're not listening to us.
He's taking away our attention.
Bingo. Yeah, he's
Well,
yeah,
maybe not just that, but their authority too, their positions.
exactly. Compromise their position. Sure. So it's here again. Once again, it's pride related. You see that all in life in general. You see that in families. You certainly see it in corporate America. Okay, and a whole lot of what I do is to what I call sort of manage corporate skirmishes. Things between people. So.
Joe, you said something a minute ago about government. So before we got on this morning, I got on my phone because I wanted to try to get some statistics with respect to authority. And I came across an article right before Tom teed us up this morning on Zoom here. And the article went on to convey a message that trust in government, trust from the people, you and I and everyone in this room today, has been declining over time because the people who are in positions of authority, the people who are elected into office, have less and less respect over time.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not getting political. I don't want to stay out of the political realm as well. But when you have leadership at the highest level conveying messages that are just not true, false messages, you have a decline of respect for that individual. When you have a decline of respect, whether it's inside a company with respect to individuals who are leading that company, in government, or more importantly in your family, then you have chaos. You have chaos. And we see the outcome of chaos in our culture today greater than it has been, in my opinion, historically. It's at levels today which are getting higher and higher and higher. I mentioned police officers, the rule of law. It's just so very disappointing with respect to the chaos we're seeing because a lack of respect. Final point is this, is that just because, and Joe, you covered this as well, just because you're in a position of authority doesn't brand you with automatic respect. It doesn't happen that way.
Nope.
But 100% of the time, respect must be earned. And you laid it out this morning about, Jesus gave us that example. He was concerned and focused on the lives of others, their individual lives. And if somebody believes that you have their best interests at heart, you're non-judgmental, you're a good listener, and you want to do everything you can to help that individual who's got a need, you're going to gain a level of respect out of that interaction from that individual. On the other hand, if it's just all about you, not about them, you're never going to gain that level of respect. So as a husband, as a father, as a grandfather, as a friend, there's something for us to learn from that. That if we have our interests first before those of others, it's going to be very difficult to earn respect over time. And respect only comes over time. You can't get it overnight. It just doesn't happen that way.
Nope.
But it happens by the things that you do every single day. And that's why it's so important to be mindful of how we gain respect and how important it is to have when you're in a position of authority. Sorry, Joe, I just wanted to share
Oh,
that.
that's great, Chris. That's great reinforcement because really the theme of this entire message of leadership as believers is it's up to us to take a stand. It is up to us to demonstrate what Jesus wants us to demonstrate in our families, in our communities, in our corporations, wherever we are and with whatever we're doing. And it's not just that we have that obligation, because it shouldn't be viewed as an obligation. It should be viewed as an opportunity, because we have what you can only have as a believer, and that's grace, and that's the spirit in your heart that Jesus put in there. That's what drives it. Try to make that point by using Paul's example, because that was his driver. It's very, very unlikely that any of us will ever experience anything near what Paul experienced, taking the message. We're not going to get shipwrecked. We're not going to get whipped. We're not going to get imprisoned, probably. Okay. I hope we don't. The point is, look at what this man endured, because he had that God's spirit in his heart. And that's now granted, we didn't have a conversion experience on the road to Damascus either. So none of us, how God spoke to you is your business. But I mean, God does speak to all of us. But I mean, that was pretty dramatic what Paul went through. But the point is still the same. We need to take a stand, and we need to be leaders. And that's what this whole message is really all about, is using Christ as the ultimate model for that. Okay.
Well, Tom
Love had a question.
Hey, quick. Yeah. I don't know how many of you guys saw the concluding season 3 Chosen.
Yes.
But it's right on this. Where they go to the Decapolis. It's that whole story, and warring people and Jesus' authority, shines through. It's just a terrific, illustration of all that you're talking about here, Joe.
Well, thank you, Todd. That is great reinforcement. Which, by the way,
worth watching.
begs the question: where do I get season 3 Chosen? Is
It's an app.
It's an app. Okay,
Yeah.
Or just go online to Angel Studios.
Okay.
They stream
It's
it.
just free. It's just free to watch. Just watch it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So,
All right.
I want to ask about this.
Dan had a comment.
Well, these 5 levels of leadership, are they sequential?
Progressive.
Well, to
progressive.
some extent they are, Ken. They're progressive. Yes. Yeah.
So in that sense, do we skip them? Are they all necessary?
Yeah, they are.
Well, yeah. This is an evolutionary path to a level of pinnacle leadership where you're by what Chris is saying, respect.
Those are all building blocks.
Yeah, it's a building block kind of thing, Ken. Now,
Okay.
some of it applies, some of it may not apply. I mean, here again, I'm just trying to give you, frankly, to use the term I like to use, I'm trying to be directionally correct, not precise. Okay, if I could give you a menu that says, here, do this for 5 years and you'll be a leader.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way. Okay,
Okay.
you earn pinnacle respect based on how you behave as a leader.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
take all the things we talked about, character, truth, honesty, all the characteristics we
Mhm.
talked about, and you put it in the framework of having authority as a leader, and this is what it kind of looks like. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's interesting, it takes time to build the respect, but it's instantaneously lost.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I lose it by one wrong word.
One wrong act. Boy, we see that in spades every day. Okay, now in the time we've got left, I want to deal into generosity, but before you flip this, that's all right. That's okay. I just want to tee it up a little bit so we have a context. I had a very, very, very narrow view of generosity for most of my life. Sure, I was helpful. I was a good Boy Scout. I did all the kinds of things you try to do, to help people. But I really had a very narrow view. And I found myself in a position about 20 years ago where I could actually and legitimately look at the concept of philanthropy. Okay. So I was talking to my financial advisor at the time about this, and he said, okay, he said, you got a lot to learn. He said, you have a lot to learn. You might have a nice checkbook, but you got a lot to learn.
All right.
So he says, here's what I'm going to recommend. He said, there's a conference that's put on every year, and it's put on by a financial services company in Boston. Can't even think of the name of it anymore, but They have a seminar on philanthropy. Now, I'm gonna suggest you go to it. It's 5 days in Boston. It's gonna cost you $5,000. But he said it's well worth it. I said, okay, so I did. So a lot of what I'm gonna talk about in generosity is what I learned in those 5 days.
Right.
Now, to answer the first question that I always get from people, the part about how to put your money in generosity was 45 minutes on the last day. So all of the week was not about where to put your money. It was about the spirit of generosity.
Yeah.
So that's what I want you to begin to understand. Chris talked about it a little bit when he teed us up, because it's not just about giving money.
It's not about the money.
Oh man, it's about a whole lot of other stuff.
Hmm.
So now with that in mind, let's go to the next chart. Okay, the virtue of giving good things to others freely and abundantly is how I define generosity. I learned that, okay? It's about giving good things to others freely and abundantly. Don't misunderstand freely and abundantly or powerful adverbs in that sentence.
Don't misunderstand things, right?
Yeah,
Things is
exactly,
Things, it's not
exactly.
just money, it's not
Yes.
just, it's all kinds of stuff.
I gotta say, you know, when downstairs feeding the homeless character.
Yeah.
At first I said, I want to thank you for that. And then I realized if I expect a thank you, it's not a gift.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking giving, that's
That-
what you were talking.
Boy, you're right on,
Oh,
Ken.
man.
That's exactly the mindset shift. That's exactly the mindset
So
shift.
if I'm expecting someone to thank me for
Yeah.
what I'm doing, then I'm not really giving a
Bingo.
gift.
You do not give the
That's what you
gift.
said. It
Yeah.
becomes a transaction.
Yeah, you don't give the
Ah,
gift.
This is good.
You get the gift.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
This is a learned character trait that involves both attitude and action, which is exactly what you just said, Ken.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Attitude and action.
Hmm.
Don't,
It really begins there.
it does. That's exactly where it begins. Yep. Okay. It involves giving to others, not simply anything in abundance, but rather giving those things that are good for others. Now, let me drill into that a little bit. One of the most tangible pieces of advice that I've taken as a result of this is when I do my giving, I do it in the context of that bullet. I make sure I know he's getting what I give,
Mhm.
whatever it is, either funds or time or whatever, specifically. And I do it anonymously to the extent I can. I mean, sometimes you can't, but I do it anonymously because I want to make sure that what I'm doing is abundant for that person or that group at that time. Okay, rather than just.
It's about them, it's not about you
That's
getting credit
exactly,
for it.
Tom. It is. It's about helping. That's the whole point of it, is to be there to do something for them.
Something that can be tricky at times as well.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking about, I went on a mission trip to Haiti, and they talked about in. That's an interesting country. I really, you know, the history, but anyway, you know, aid packages come into Haiti. They
Oh, yeah.
need it, right? But they do things like we send a whole bunch of clothing. Well, let's say there was, when I was there, they were talking about, there are some people who are going into the US and buying this really cheap clothing and bringing it, right?
Yeah.
And building up a business by doing it, which is a really good thing.
Yeah.
Well, they're trying to build this business, and then a big aid package comes in with a whole bunch of clothing.
There goes their business.
There goes the
Exactly.
business. That's right.
Exactly. So are you really helping?
Yeah.
By giving in that case? And I gotta think in a more local sense, it's the same thing.
Oh, sure.
You gotta be careful.
Absolutely. You gotta kind of unpack what the people need to make sure. I skipped bullet 2 and I apologize for that, but let's go over that one. It's pretty important. It's not a random idea or a haphazard behavior, but rather in its mature form, a basic personal moral orientation to life.
There you go.
It's a shift in how you live. It's a shift. Why? Yeah, it's a shift
You're
here.
right there.
Absolutely. You're right, Bill.
Doing it on purpose.
Yeah. So now let's go to the fourth bullet here. Always intends to enhance the true well-being of those to whom it gives. I put grace and mercy there because isn't that what Jesus has done? He's given us something. It enhances our well-being. His love, his grace and mercy. Unearned, unmerited, unwarranted, can't work for it. A lot of your generosity to people is something that they can't work for. They can't do themselves. You're doing it for them. And you need to enhance their well-being with your mercy and your grace.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, to Chris's point earlier, also, what is given can be various things: money, possessions, attention, aid, encouragement, emotional availability, and the
Absolutely.
list goes on.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a key point. Generosity does not just money. In fact, sometimes you'll find, particularly in a family setting, that the most appreciated generosity
It's your
is
time or your.
time and a kind word,
Yeah.
you know, and things of that nature. I believe that the real legacy of us is a legacy of faith to our families. Sure, my kids are going to do really well when I'm gone, but so what? I just took care of that. Okay. The point is, what I really want them to understand is how to have a relationship with Jesus, and that's how I behave when I'm with them. That's the legacy I want to live. The confidence and the power and the comfort and the peace that comes from having a relationship with God. Not only that, they're only going to get that money in incremental ways because I set it up that way. Not enough to screw them up, you know. There you go. So think about where you are. One of the things we did in this exercise is we did what they called a generosity map. And what they ask you to do is make a list of all the ways that you think you're being generous, and then assign a percentage to it as it related to your priority and or the time you spend doing it.
Mhm.
And man, I'm telling you, it was pretty amazing when you look at that and you go, whoa, you know, that's what I'm doing. This is what I'd like to do. And there's a big difference.
Hmm.
Here again, I can't emphasize enough. This conference on philanthropy was about helping you understand what the attitude is to have a spirit of generosity. Change your attitude, look at it differently. To start with, you don't ever look at the person you're giving to as someone beneath you. That is a big mistake
Mhm.
because that drives behaviors that are inappropriate. So I remember spending quite a bit of time talking about that.
Attitude adjustment.
Just like Jesus, everybody is Jesus. Hey, everybody was the same. They were a soul that needed to be saved.
There's a guy I mentor disciple with, he's in prison, younger guy. And several times he's asked, man, Tom, I just appreciate, you know, all the time you give me and all the money, blah, blah, blah. But I just don't get it. Why do you like me? Why are you spending time? Well, you know what? Why are you so nice to me? And every time my answer has been, you know what, Brian, we're all in this together. There's going to be a time when I'm going to need you to help me.
Yeah.
You know, we got to help each other out when we need it. You need it now. Someday I'm going to need it. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
Just trying to be an example. You're going to help somebody else down the road someday that's going to need you like you need me now. You know, I'm not trying to get an attaboy t-shirt out of this. I know you need help. I know someday I'm going to need help. I'm just trying to be a good example.
That's a good
It's a great
illustration of
answer.
not being
Yeah.
above.
Great answer.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
A
the,
brother needs help,
Yeah.
man. So
Oh,
what does
yeah.
a brother do? A brother helps a
Yeah.
brother.
yeah, well, to use a word, it's encouragement. I mean, you had a motivation to help that guy that he didn't even understand.
Yeah.
So part of the learning cycle is everybody's got to come to terms with why somebody's doing for you what they're doing. I mean, yeah.
Another example, we used to do free gift wrapping at the store in Wilsonville at Christmas time,
Yeah,
my community group. And, you know, people would say, oh, great, okay, wrap my present. And they're looking around for the little basket for a donation thing.
Yeah.
They just expect that,
sure.
like, don't you want any money? Oh, no. What, you don't? Is this for a church? They're like, why don't we all go to church? Yeah. Well, why are you doing this? Just want to be good neighbors, that's
Yeah.
all.
Want to help you.
Yeah.
People have a hard
Don't need
time
any money.
accepting generosity. That's the other thing you learn
Oh,
in the
yeah.
seminar is how
Yeah.
difficult it will be for people to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Right.
So it takes some work. Well, let's go to the next slide because that really is about the spirit of generosity. And I call it living life from the inside out.
I like that.
Okay. Living life from the inside out. Let your heart drive
Yeah.
your behaviors. This concept Yes, that one engages others with an open heart and an open mind, just like Jesus. Remember, we talk a lot about the head and the heart. So have an open mind and an open heart. Keep them both open.
You know,
And
I just want to, something that's, I've been working on, for a little bit now, trying to, really unpack, the real, motivation of anything in this life. And I think it really ends up coming down to the fact that, God loved us first. And because he loves us and we begin to love him, that's really the motivation for acting the way we do. You know, that's the fundamental, that's the root. The root is he loves us. We began to love him. And how do we love him? By following his word, by doing the things that he did. You know, that's kind of the root in my mind.
Mhm.
Yep.
Good point, Jack.
good comment, Jay.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a simple, easy way to look at it, and it's spot on.
Yeah.
This next point is a real wake-up call. And it kind of hit me hard. I remember when I was there during this conference. But the spirit of generosity presumes a non-judgmental attitude along with a tolerance for ideas and behaviors that may not comport with one's own. Okay. But think of Jesus. He was out to save the whole world. It wasn't just the Israelites. He wasn't just going to save the Gentiles. He was going to save the whole world. That's why he came here. That's what God put him here for, to save everyone. So you kind of have to have a pretty open mind about that. I've learned after dealing in a variety of settings and sitting at the table with people that normally I wouldn't expect to have in my home or sit around the table with, you can learn a lot. And a lot of people, you know, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn and accept and care for.
That's another question that I've had a hard time with from my prison buddy. He'd ask, well, why would a guy like you want to be a friend with a guy like me? You know, a drug addict, a sex addict, a ne'er-do-well who was, you know, raped when he was a kid. Why would anybody like you want to hang out with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And oh man, that was hard to answer because I didn't want to sound like, well, Jesus hung out with the less thans and the losers, and I didn't want to say it like that. I mean, my answer.
We're all the same.
Yeah, basically, my answer got to that. You know what, Brian? We're all sinners. We all have issues. We all need help from time to time.
Well, Tom, I think that was a great tee up for this third point. Generosity of spirit requires that one spend more time, more energy, looking at what is good and positive in someone than what one might think is bad or negative.
There you go.
Look at the
Which is
positive.
exactly
Yeah.
what this guy
Yeah.
needs to understand about
Yeah.
your motivations.
Yeah,
You're looking at what's good, and you're not looking at what the problems he's had.
get that stuff.
Forget that.
Trying to
stuff.
forgive that stuff and move on.
That's what Jesus did. That's what your heart does. That's what your heart view does.
Mhm.
Yeah. I've just had so many experiences in my life where I've had an exchange with someone on that basis,
Mhm.
and they're absolutely flabbergasted that I would think that way about them. You really like me? You really think I'm okay? You
Yeah.
go, yeah,
Yeah.
of course you are, you know. But this negative attribution is unfortunately a killer component of our culture.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks negative instead of positive. I'm making a joke, obviously, but
Yeah.
negative attribution is unfortunately too common when something happens. Oh God, what did I do wrong? Or what did I do wrong?
Part of
What
the
did I
whole
do
different-
wrong this time?
Yeah.
Again.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, geez, I did it again. The bottom line for the whole thing, guys, is this final point, because we're getting down to our time frame here. How we see the world really determines how we engage the world. Remember, we live by faith, not by sight.
Mhm.
So we have to look at every situation we're in every environment, on the basis of our faith, not necessarily what we see. That doesn't mean don't be cautious. It doesn't mean don't be wise. It just means that trust God in all you do, and keep the faith. And in terms of generosity,
Mhm.
that'll keep you between the goalposts, down the middle of the fairway.
The bigger
Because-
picture.
Yeah, the bigger picture. you all have to decide, frankly, what level of philanthropy or generosity you're gonna participate in. That's your business. I went to the trouble of going to this thing, which was well worth it for me, to get a shift in my attitude and to get a perspective from professionals on how I need to behave. And what's really interesting about it, final comment. I talked to many people, many financial groups about this. And what was so interesting to me is how, if you don't have the right attitude, they don't want to do business with you. Oh, yeah. You will say, I got a couple $1 million. I want to, well, what's your attitude? But they interview you. Make sure you got, I'm exaggerating a little bit to make the point, but they don't just take your money. They want to make sure you got the right attitude and the right perspective and the right point of view. And I think they do that because they've learned over the years that people that give out of guilt or people that give for the wrong reasons, that backfires. And that doesn't help anybody because it creates an entitlements mentality. So you feel like, well, it's kind of like what you said. I feel like I'm helping. You need to thank me. Oh, well, wait a minute.
What's in it for
Where does
me?
that fit in the old generosity cycle? Okay. So that's what was amazing to me. How do you go out and try to shop your generosity and people don't want to buy it unless you got the right attitude. I was amazed with that. It was just one heck of an experience. Yeah. Yeah.
What a great point, Joe. Just excellent summary.
Yeah.
You know, Joe, as I'm listening to you and summarizing this last part on generosity, the thought keeps coming back to me how God has an expectation of all of us, every single one of us, and every single man, with respect to the topic of stewardship, being a good steward. It's an expectation. It's not just a simple request, but it's a higher level expectation of making sure that we manage effectively the resources and the assets that God allows us to manage. They belong to Him, but He allows us and provides wisdom for us to manage those effectively. A very key component of being an effective steward is giving.
Yeah.
Giving. And unless that component is working with the others in terms of the topic of stewardship, you're not going to be effective in terms of managing the resources and assets that God has given each of us to manage those effectively for the benefit of others. Now, obviously, it benefits your family first. You got to take care of your family, but He gives us sufficient funds and resources to impact others in a favorable way as well. That's an expectation. And being generous and giving is a very critical part of that. It's just not taken in, but it's giving out. It's like that stream of water coming through. You take in and it keeps coming out. And the more that goes out, the more that comes in. It's usually the way it works. Those are the principles here. So I just so much appreciate, Joe, how you came in covering these two incredible principles of authority, generosity, on top of what we've already unpacked in the area of integrity, humility, and honesty. Just fantastic principles. And guys, I'd like to just offer it up to you before we close today. Any other comments that you might want to make about either today's session or where this overall leadership topic is going as we get into 2023?
It's good. Awful.
Yeah, Tom. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, just a million things. Thank you so much, Joe. And it's just a rich discussion, everybody, all your comments. The, many issues, but one I thought, Joe, or anybody, examples of leaders who had the integrity, the humility, the honesty, the authority, right, to say this institution is corrupt. This institution is, flawed. I'm leaving, or what do I do with that situation? I'd be interested in, maybe not now because there's not time, but another time. What can we learn from leaders who got to that point and
Well,
couldn't do it anymore?
interestingly enough, Tom, I spent quite a bit of time in my professional practice and have for a while with leaders that are exactly where you just described.
Mhm.
Help them to decide what the next chapter is, whether they go or stay. And it usually relates to them trying to understand to what extent they have influence. How is their influence working? So yeah, we could have a pretty lengthy conversation about that subject.
Mm.
And I would say, just generally from my, now keep in mind, I represent one point of reference, but from my experience, I would say I do not know of a leader that I have had any sort of intimacy with in terms of an exchange of thought. That 90% of them don't have that question on their mind.
Mm.
Most of them do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They wonder about whether they're effective. They wonder about their own personal effectiveness,
Sure.
not efficiency, effectiveness. And that is a huge measure on the minds of boards of directors as it relates to leaders. And I do a lot of work with boards. And in about every case that I've ever worked on with a board, integrity and character is a huge priority to boards of directors. And now, contrary to what a lot of people think about corporate America, I mean, if I make that comment to a 30-year-old, they want to tell me I'm a lying SOB.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, these guys are just,
That's right.
I want to say, well, you've never been in a boardroom.
Yeah.
Wise ass, pardon me. I'm telling you, character issues, integrity, doing things right, taking care of people, having a legacy of influence and respect and being a giver are critical components for most executives I deal with. And by the way, only about 20% are believers. Okay,
Mhm.
so this is not necessarily a Christian orientation. I deal with people all over the world and in all cultures. Buddhist. I'm working with a guy right now that's a high-level guy in a Buddhist church.
Yeah.
Now, my goal is to introduce him to Jesus, but that's down the road. But Tom, no, your point's well taken. We don't see it because what we see is the behavior and the information of the dark side. We don't see the bright side, unfortunately, because that doesn't sell newspapers. Okay.
Mm.
Well, it keeps us humble when we don't see the results.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
because but every once in a while, the Lord does give us the feedback.
Yeah.
It says,
Mm.
you're doing well.
Well,
As a community group leader, I keep asking that question all the time. Am I effective in leading this group or should somebody else be doing it? Because I don't feel very strong as a leader.
Yeah.
So
well, if you want to think of somebody on a national stage that really has demonstrated a lot of these principles, think of Franklin Graham.
There we go. Yeah.
Billy Graham's son. I mean, he's demonstrated in many realities on a global stage these characteristics. So he happens to be obviously a Christian believer and so forth, but there's others. You can go back and you can look at the lives of a lot of these leaders.
Do you know him personally?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I have been at conferences with him. In fact, I've been on the same podium with him.
Oh,
Yeah. Anyway. Okay, guys, let me make a couple more comments about where we're going. We've got two more characteristics to deal with. We've got passion and courage. So we may take those individually, we may take them together. It's all going to depend on how I put it together this week, because that's a lot of information. Probably we'll do them separately because courage itself is a huge character subject. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what I need you to do is give me some feedback on how this went, and give me feedback where you want to go next. Chris and I have talked about an idea that we can share maybe next week of where we go next. But what you don't realize, and I'm thanking you in advance for being in this group, a lot of the reason I'm doing this is to test run some of this information and trial it. Maybe for this radio opportunity I have, for the book I'm in the process of writing. So you all are making a great contribution to me and to Chris in your feedback so that we can get a feel for how this is going over and if it's worthwhile.
Got a lot of notes.
Good. Well, that's good to see. All right. Anyway, I'll get off the stage now, Chris, and turn it back to you.
That's great, Joe. It's everything you said is spot on. And I'm really glad you're going to unpack those last two principles. because they're huge. I mean, just courage alone can take, I mean,
Yeah,
it's amazing. So thank you for doing that. And we are in no rush to go through this series. I mean, I have some things to come behind you, Joe, but I just want you to take as much time as you need in presenting each of these principles. You've done God has used you tremendously, and you're blessing the lives of the men in this group, but you're also blessing the lives of those who aren't a part of this group because it's being recorded. Tom's sharing that, on YouTube, and with the guys that are copied each week that aren't able to attend, they can tap into these messages as well. A lot of benefits through these recordings.
thank you.
And by the way, it's fellas, it's more than just Joe. The comments that you make, the way Ken opened up today, and Tom, it's all being recorded, all this. And that's for the benefit of others. And we all learn a lot more when there's exchanges like this, when there's clarity that comes out of these exchanges. What does it look like? The pictures that we're able to draw from these conversations. So when you come in these sessions, we meet every Friday morning. What you say and contribute, remember, it's not only benefiting the immediate group here, but it's also going to benefit those who can tap into this message because it's being recorded. Okay? So thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah, please.
So one thing that, in order to be a good leader, right? In my mind, you have to be inside God's will, right? So, I would love to talk about that particular item as it relates to, managing or leading, a group or an organization, how a leader goes about ensuring that he's within God's will, and that, that's the direction that drives where he takes his organization or his people.
Well, your wish will be granted, because a whole big part of passion is exactly what you're talking about, Jake, right? And we're going to talk a lot about how a leader learns to focus their passion and communicate their behavior through their behavior to send that message. So yeah, we'll get to that next week. In fact, the more I'm thinking about it, we're going to have a separate week for each of those two subjects.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Jay, thanks for mentioning that. I also took a note on your comments, and I'd like to talk to you more about that offline, okay, over the next couple of weeks, Jay. I'll reach out to you. We can set up a time to talk, okay?
Okay,
Because I know it's important.
sure.
Thank you, Joe, for that as well. Okay, anything else, guys, before we break out for today?
I was thinking of the football team, especially when they trade or want to go to another place, making that decision is that a winning team? Do they have a winning attitude, or are they
What are
losing?
their results?
Yeah, are there results there?
there,
So
sure.
to me, that was a
Good analogy.
good analogy
Yeah.
of how they make a decision.
I want to play with that quarterback because he knows how to win.
Yes.
We certainly hear that, don't we?
Yeah, all the time.
You look at track record, you look at credibility, demonstrated, not just a flash in the pan. Yeah,
What does winning mean, though?
another great question. Okay.
Great question.
Yeah.
I
we can
like
come
that.
back. In fact, I'm gonna make a note of that too. These are good. This is great, Tom.
Joe's got us all going here. This is
Yeah,
great.
He does. He does. And-
If
and
you
so-
ever, if you ever have the opportunity to talk to a professional that manages professional athletes
Mm.
and understand how they market an athlete, which is what you're talking about, to change teams, you would be, I can tell you, I've done this. I can tell you that you will be utterly blown away at
Flabbergasted.
the analysis that they do on that player as a product
Yeah.
to fit that team.
Wow.
You cannot imagine the level of analysis that goes into, yes, the impact that guy's gonna have, yes. Because frankly, if you're negotiating, what you're doing is you're selling a product for $100 million. Or you better be
That
able to
amount of money,
explain
you
why they're
better
worth
know.
it. Okay? But that's really what it boils down to. It's pretty amazing. If you ever had that opportunity, take it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
In the same way, choosing an elder for an elder board is, we have the guidelines
Yeah,
in Timothy on
Oh, yeah.
what those qualifications are.
yeah, that's really clear.
So the analysis that goes on there to make sure that you're leading that church or that congregation or that group.
Yep.
Right.
Good stuff, guys. Good stuff.
All right.
Okay. Just fantastic. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for everyone in this group here. As Joe mentioned a few minutes ago, give some thought with respect to the way all of this messages have been delivered. If you can provide any feedback to Joe between you and him, that'd be wonderful. Maybe as a group, we summarize this in another couple of weeks. Very, very important. So with that, Brother Ken, would you close us in prayer today, please?